He didn't break up for space, right? Your cousin wanted him and got him. What happened that night?
I'm Maura Lennix. I grew up in Michigan where holidays aren't optional. Skip one and Grandma Nadine Ormond makes sure you pay. My cousin Paloma Hartwick was always the family's shining star. Beautiful, adored, untouchable. When I was 23, I brought my boyfriend, Dashiell Corwin, to Thanksgiving at Aunt Corinne Telford's. After dinner, we were on the couch, and Paloma slid between us like I wasn't there. She pressed close, asked about his work, laughed, touched his arm. Later, I caught them alone in the kitchen, her hand on his chest. She smiled and said she was just telling him how lucky he was to have me. 3 weeks later, he needed space. 2 months later, I saw him tagged in Paloma's photo, his arm around her waist.
After Dashiell, how did you realize it wasn't a one-time betrayal, but a pattern? And how did your family respond?
It spread like a crack I kept pretending was just a scratch. Every holiday, if I arrived with a date, Paloma arrived dressed like the room was her stage, and nobody corrected it. Men drifted toward her like she was gravity. When I tried to name it, my family rewrote it. I was jealous, I was dramatic, Paloma was just friendly. Eloan told me Paloma didn't mean anything by it. Aunt Corinne called it competition. Grandma Nadine said I should be more feminine and maybe then I'd keep a man. So I stopped bringing dates. I told everyone I was focused on work and happy being single, but it was fear. I still dated, but I kept my life private because I refused to give Paloma a front row seat to my humiliation.
Then Stellan Wexler came along. What felt different about him before you ever brought him near your family?
With Stellan, my body did something it hadn't done in years. It unclenched. He was steady, funny, attentive in small ways that piled up into safety. He didn't vanish for days. He didn't turn affection into a guessing game. When he asked questions, he waited for the answer like it mattered, not like it was trivia. 8 months in, he started talking about meeting my family like it was normal, like it wasn't a trap-a-door. I tried to dodge it with work deadlines and busy weekends, but Christmas was coming and I was running out of excuses. I kept thinking, if anyone can stand in that room and not drift, it's him. I wanted to believe I could have a life where Paloma didn't get a vote.
You warned Stellan in advance, right? Tell me exactly what you asked of him and how he reacted.
I didn't spring Paloma on him. I sat him down and laid out the history. Every holiday, every boyfriend, every time I'd felt erased in my own family. I didn't ask him to perform heroics. I asked for basics. Stay close, don't get pulled aside, don't play along with flirting that pretends to be harmless. Stellan laughed, not cruelly, just confident, like someone who'd never had to defend a boundary under pressure. He said, Maura, I'm a grown man. I love you. I'm not going to let your cousin seduce me at Christmas. I wanted that to be true so badly I could taste it. But a small part of me remembered every man who promised, then paused. I nodded anyway, and I told myself trust was my last act of courage.
Take me inside that Christmas Eve. What did you notice the instant Paloma saw Stellan?
I walked into my parents' house, already bracing, like my muscles had memorized the room. Stellan held my hand and kept touching me in small, public ways, his arm around my waist, a kiss to my forehead, like he was reminding the room who he came with. Paloma was already there, polished and bright, wearing something that looked painted on. The second she saw him, her eyes lit up like she'd been handed a prize. She crossed the room, said I was so lucky, and hugged him too long. She talked to him like I was scenery. Stellan stayed polite and kept his arm around me. For one fragile hour, I felt the pattern wobble, and that little calm tasted like oxygen. I started to relax, thinking maybe he really would keep choosing me.
She didn't attack right away, did she? How did Paloma work the room when the goal was to separate you without making it obvious?
Paloma never rushed. That patience was part of the weapon. She drifted into every conversation Stellan and I had, laughed too easily at his jokes, asked about his work with interest that felt personal. If I spoke, she found a way to answer for me or pivot back to him. Nothing was overt enough to accuse. Everything was intentional enough to bruise. I tried to keep my face neutral because reacting is how I always became the problem. Stellan stayed close, and I kept telling myself to reward that with trust, like feeding a fragile thing to keep it alive. But Paloma kept circling, inserting herself between us without physically moving us apart. making it feel normal that his attention split. That's how she wins. She turns disrespect into atmosphere and then asks why you can't breathe.
Okay, then came the moment she finally got him alone. What was the setup and what did you see when he came back?
She created a reason that sounded harmless. She spilled wine and turned it into a joke only he could solve, teasing that, as a doctor, he must know how to fix things. I watched Stellan hesitate, just a heartbeat, but it was the same pause I'd seen before. He looked at me like he was asking permission, and in that instant I felt the trap close. He followed her into the kitchen. I counted minutes without meaning to, like my body started keeping score. When they came back, Paloma's dress was fine, and Stellan looked flushed, like he'd been running. He said she was asking medical questions about her mom. He sounded reasonable, and that was the worst part, because reasonable is how betrayal hides in daylight.
In the car, what did he say and what did you recognize in him that scared you more than any rumor could?
I cried quietly while he gripped the steering wheel. He insisted nothing happened, that Paloma was just friendly, that I was reading too much into it. I didn't argue details because details weren't the point anymore. It was the look in his eyes when he talked about her, curiosity dressed up as innocence. I'd seen that look on Dashiell, on Bram Calderidge, on Silas Endicott, on men who swore they were different until they weren't. When Stellan called my reaction overreacting, it landed like my family's favorite verdict. I felt myself shrinking inside my own story again, questioning my memory, wondering if I was the unstable one, but my body knew. It always knew first.
And then it ended the way the others ended. How did Stellan frame the breakup and what did you do afterward?
In February, Stellan said he needed to focus on residency. It sounded responsible, like a choice for his future, not something he was doing to me. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I was too tired to argue with the script I'd memorized. In March, I saw him at a restaurant with a blonde woman. It wasn't Paloma, but that almost made it worse because it told me the pattern didn't even require her to win. She was just the trigger that revealed who was willing to drift. I stopped dating. I stopped going to family events. I used work as a shield and let calls go unanswered. My mom sounded disappointed, but nobody sounded curious. Silence became my boundary.
You stepped away from them and then you found the library program. What were you looking for when you signed up?
I needed something that belonged to me and couldn't be taken by Paloma's smile. I started volunteering at the local library literacy program. It was steady work, helping adults read, helping people write letters that made them feel human again. There was a branch where volunteers corresponded with inmates trying to improve reading and writing skills. I signed up because I needed purpose and because the distance felt safe. My family's world had taught me everything becomes a stage. The library felt like the opposite: quiet, practical, kind without performance. I didn't go in looking for love. I went in looking for air. I thought I was choosing a good deed that would fill time. I didn't know I was choosing the first relationship where I wouldn't be competing for space in my own life.
And that's where Ronan Kittner enters. What was in that first letter that made you write back and keep writing?
The program matched me with Ronan Kittner. He was in his 30s, finishing a long sentence for armed robbery. His first letter was short and careful, like kindness was something he expected to be punished for wanting. He thanked me and said he hoped to improve his writing before release. I wrote back with ordinary pieces of myself. In project management and tech, hiking, weather in Michigan. Ronan responded with more detail. Growing up in Detroit, making reckless choices, prison giving him time to think about the man he wanted to be. His writing wasn't polished, but it was honest, and honesty felt rare. We wrote weekly, then more. I started looking forward to his letters like they were proof I still existed outside my family's story.
When you finally told Ronan about Palomi, what did he say that changed how you saw the whole situation?
Ronan wrote about the books he was reading, the classes he was taking, anger management, reentry prep, anything that might keep him from going back. His plans were practical: construction work, maybe community college, staying with his aunt, Tressa Kincaid, in Grand Rapids until he got stable. And I told him about Paloma, about years of being treated like I was invisible and wrong for noticing. I expected advice or pity. Instead, he said, "Your cousin sounds like someone who only feels good when she's making other people feel small. That's not about you. That's about her." It was so simple it cracked something open in me. I realized I'd been carrying shame that wasn't mine. He didn't try to fix me, he just named the truth.
8 months of letters is a real bond. What made you say yes when Ronan asked to meet after his release?
The letters became a private room where I could breathe. Ronan could be funny without trying. He could be vulnerable without making it my job to rescue him. I trusted him in a way I hadn't trusted men who lived down the street. Then he wrote that he'd be released in 2 months and asked if I'd meet him for coffee. No pressure, he'd understand if I said no. I said yes before I could overthink it. Later, I asked myself why. Loneliness was part of it, curiosity too. But the biggest reason was quieter. This connection felt like it belonged to me. It existed outside the holiday stage where Paloma always won. Saying yes felt like choosing a door no one else could slam in my face.
So you meet him in Grand Rapids. What did you expect and what surprised you the moment he walked in?
I expected sharp awkwardness, like meeting a stranger I'd imagined 100 ways. When Ronan walked into the coffee shop in Grand Rapids, I recognized him immediately from the small photo he'd once sent. Tall, broad shoulders, hair cut short, a nervous smile that didn't try to charm. He was handsome in an unpolished way, like someone who'd stopped relying on appearances to be forgiven. We talked for hours. It wasn't dramatic, it was easy. He spoke about adjusting to freedom, about drywall work, about staying with Tressa. I spoke about my job, my apartment, my family. When he asked to see me again, I said yes without that old internal bargaining. It felt strange to call it dating, but it felt real.
As you started dating, what did Ronan do that made you feel truly seen? And how did Thanksgiving re enter the picture?
We spent time together in quiet, ordinary ways: movies, dinners, long walks where silence wasn't a threat. Ronan listened like he was collecting details because they mattered, not because he wanted leverage later. He could sense my anxiety before I admitted it. He knew when I needed space and when I needed contact, and he did it without making me feel guilty for having emotions. That scared me more than flirtation because it implied I might actually be safe. Then my mom called in November. She said the family missed me, Grandma Nadine kept asking, and it had been almost a year since I'd shown up for a holiday. I said I'd think about Thanksgiving, and the old knot came back instantly. In bed that night, I told Ronan why I was terrified.
And that's when he said, "Take me," right? What did you hear in that? Confidence, defiance, or something else?
He said it plainly. Take me. I laughed at first because it sounded like bravado, like someone volunteering for a storm they didn't understand. I warned him again. Paloma would flirt, touch, isolate, and my family would pretend it was harmless. I told him she'd destroyed every relationship I'd brought home. Ronan shrugged, calm in a way that made me nervous. He reminded me he'd spent 7 years in prison and learned how to read people who smile while they sharpen knives. What I heard wasn't defiance, it was certainty. Like he wasn't going to compete because he wasn't there to be won. I thought, screw it. What's the worst that can happen? I was already halfway out of my family's life, so I said yes.
On the drive there, did you give him one last warning? And what did the room feel like before Paloma even appeared?
I did. I told him Paloma would try to separate him, and I needed him to stay near me, to not engage, to not get curious. Ronan promised he wasn't going anywhere. When we arrived, the family's reaction threw me off. My mom hugged me like I'd returned from a long trip. My dad, Graham Lennix, shook Ronan's hand and asked what he did. Ronan said construction, and my dad launched into a story about building his deck, like nothing about this moment was loaded. I almost let myself enjoy that normality. It was disorienting, like the room could be gentle if you didn't poke the bruise. Then I felt the temperature change. Paloma walked in from the kitchen in heels like punctuation. Even before she spoke, I knew the script was starting.
When Paloma introduced herself, what did she do? Subtle things that told you the routine had started again?
She extended her hand and held Ronan's grip a second too long, then turned to me with bright, fake innocence. She'd heard nothing about him, like my privacy was a flaw. She asked how long we'd been together, how we met, questions arranged like steps toward a trap. I hesitated, but Ronan answered first. A penpal program. I watched Paloma's eyes light up. Not warmth, opportunity. She made it sound adorable, like she was generously accepting something quirky instead of storing it for later. Then she started her routine. touching his arm when she laughed, leaning in when he spoke, asking personal questions meant to pull him away. Ronan stayed polite and brief, then turned back to me or someone else. His hand rested on my lower back like a quiet boundary. Paloma suggested he help with chairs in the garage. Ronan said, "I think your dad can handle it," and didn't move.
At dinner, how hard did she push, and what did it feel like watching Ronan refuse to feed the performance?
Paloma sat across from us and kept trying to pull Ronan into her orbit. Sports, movies, music, anything that could turn into a private joke. She told stories designed to make her sound generous and adventurous. She laughed louder when he glanced her way, like volume could create connection. Ronan nodded, smiled occasionally, but he didn't feed it. He spoke to my uncle about fishing. He asked Grandma Nadine about her stuffing recipe. Under the table, he held my hand like a promise only I could feel. That small pressure on my fingers undid years of dread. I realized I'd spent so long bracing for the moment a man's attention tipped away that I forgot what it felt like to be held steady. Paloma's smile started to strain, and I could see frustration flashing through her like heat. It was the first time I'd ever watched her lose control of the room.
After dinner, the drink table cornering, this is usually where everything collapses. What happened in that moment?
Everyone moved into the living room, and Paloma cornered Ronan near the drinks. My heart started pounding because I knew this scene too well. The isolated conversation, the exchanged number, the beginning of the end. I watched her lean in, touch his chest, whisper into his ear like they shared a secret. Ronan stepped back. He said something I couldn't hear, then walked away and sat beside me on the couch, calm, as if Paloma were background noise. Paloma froze by the table, stunned, like her own tricks had stopped working midair. My mom leaned toward me and whispered, surprised by herself, "I like this one." I almost cried right there, not because I'd won, but because my body finally believed I might be safe. Paloma kept circling for the next hour, but Ronan stayed where he was, next to me, present, unshaken.
You thought Thanksgiving was the win. So, what did Paloma do the very next week to flip the story?
I expected relief, but Paloma never plays one game. A Lowen called, sounding tight, like she already had a verdict. Paloma had been over crying, saying I brought an ex-con to Thanksgiving without warning anyone. She said she'd looked Ronan up and found his record, and now she felt unsafe and disrespected. I told my mom Ronan served his time and is a good man, and Paloma was only angry because she couldn't manipulate him. Lowen sighed like I was missing the real issue. Graham was upset. Grandma Nadine or Mom was worried. Nobody asked what Paloma did. They asked why I didn't manage her feelings first. I hung up shaking and didn't talk to them for weeks. My phone filled with texts, and each one felt like another lock clicking shut from the outside.
When you went silent, what did the rest of the family do? And how did Ronan react to being treated like a threat?
Silence didn't protect me. It made room for texts. Relatives wrote like they were filing charges. Selfish, reckless, irresponsible. One warned me to consider everyone's safety, as if Ronan's past erased his present. I watched them circle Paloma, turning her outrage into victimhood, turning me into the cause again. Only Kier sent something human. Paloma was a drama queen, and Ronan seemed fine. Ronan still felt guilty. He said he should have told me to warn them, that he should have known his record would be used against him. I told him it wasn't his fault, but it still ate at me. I decided I wouldn't show up for Christmas and pretend everything was normal. I realized Paloma didn't steal boyfriends. She stole narratives. Stepping back felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years.
You skipped Christmas. Where did you spend it? And what did Mira's January call sound like when she asked to meet?
I stayed away and spent Christmas with Ronan at Tressa Kincaid's house. She made ham and mashed potatoes and didn't ask invasive questions or hand out passive-aggressive advice. The quiet felt unreal, like my body forgot how to brace. But calm doesn't erase consequences. In January, Mira Pennington called and said she needed to talk in person. Her voice had that careful edge people use before bad news. I almost said no out of habit because distance had become my shield, but something in her tone made me agree. We met at a coffee shop. Mira ordered a latte and didn't touch it. She held the cup and looked at me like she was deciding how to say it. I could feel my stomach drop before she even opened her mouth.
So, what did Mira tell you about Paloma's therapy and what changed in her after Ronan wasn't interested?
Mira started with context, but I knew worse was coming. She said Paloma began therapy last year because she was having panic attacks. The therapist diagnosed her with intense insecurity and a need for constant validation from men. The therapist urged Paloma to apologize to me, to confront what she'd been doing. Paloma refused and said I was jealous and bitter, that she didn't owe me anything. Then Mira said Thanksgiving cracked something. Paloma came to her apartment afterward and broke down, sobbing that she didn't understand why Ronan wasn't interested, why her usual tricks didn't work. Paloma said she felt invisible for the first time in her life. My first reaction was ugly satisfaction. Then Mira's face tightened, and I understood she wasn't delivering karma. She was warning me.
Warning you about what was Paloma doing behind the scenes and what was she planning to do to Ronan.
Mira leaned closer. Paloma had been stalking Ronan online, obsessive digging. She found his old Facebook from before prison and pulled articles about his arrest. She tracked down his ex-girlfriend and messaged her, fishing for stories. My blood went cold. Mira said Paloma couldn't handle losing, so she was trying to prove Ronan was dangerous, to give the family a reason to reject him and reject me. Paloma was the one who told Elowen about Ronan's record. She printed articles and showed them to Grandma Nadine Ormond like evidence. Then Mira said the worst part. Paloma was talking about going to the police and claiming Ronan made her feel threatened at Thanksgiving. That wasn't drama anymore. That was an attempt to ruin someone's future. Mira said she couldn't let me walk into that blind.
After that coffee shop warning, what did you say to Ronan? And how did he respond when you told him Paloma might involve the police?
I left the shop and called Ronan. I told him everything. The stalking, the articles, the talk of a report. He went quiet, then said he'd expected something like this. People don't like when ex-cons try to build normal lives. Someone always wants to tear you down. I said we had to stop her. Ronan said there was nothing to stop because he hadn't threatened her or done anything wrong. If she filed a false report, it should get thrown out. I hated that word. I told him even a baseless accusation could follow him. Ronan admitted it probably would. I felt rage like fire, not just for me, but for the cruelty of trying to ruin someone's future, because he didn't choose her.
You tried to figure out a move. What options did you consider, and what was Ronan's surprising plan when you felt trapped?
For 2 days, I replayed it, searching for a clean move. I considered calling Paloma, but I knew she'd twist it into proof I was unstable. I thought about warning Elowen and Graham, but they were already against Ronan. Then Ronan said something that sounded wrong. What if we let her do it? He explained a false report is most dangerous when it's just words against words. If Paloma wanted to lie, let her put it in writing where it could be tested. I asked how we'd prove she was lying. Ronan pulled out his phone and opened a voice memo app. He said he'd recorded a voice memo for himself that night, something he started doing as a kind of journaling after prison. So he had a time-stamped record of what was said at the drink table. My stomach dropped, then steadied, because for once we had something solid.
Then he played it. What was on that recording, and how did it change your fear into a plan?
Ronan hit play on his time-stamped voice memo, and Paloma's voice came through clear and cruel. She told him I was damaged and insecure, that he seemed smart and could do better. Then she offered her number and invited him to have a real conversation. Ronan's voice followed, calm and flat. He wasn't interested, and she should work on being a better person before ruining someone else's life. Paloma laughed, bitter, and called him judgmental and boring. When the audio ended, the room felt sharper. It proved she was the aggressor. If she claimed he threatened her, the recording contradicted it and showed her pushing, recruiting, undermining. I asked if he recorded that just in case. He said, 7 years inside teaches you to protect yourself. We agreed to wait. If she filed, we'd use the recording. If she didn't, we'd move on.
You waited for weeks. What happened when nothing came? And why did you still end up walking into that hospital room?
3 weeks passed and nothing happened. I started thinking maybe Mira was wrong, maybe Paloma backed down. I relaxed into the fragile, normal Ronan and I were building. Then Elowen called again. Paloma had been in a car accident, just a fender bender, but she was shaken and wanted me to visit her in the hospital. I said no. Elowen got angry and accused me of being cruel, of tearing the family apart. I hung up, but guilt came anyway, automatic and heavy. They trained me to feel guilty for boundaries. So I went, not because I wanted Paloma's tears, because I wanted to prove I could be the bigger person without becoming small. In that hallway, old habits tugged me back into place. My stomach nodded, but my feet kept moving.
In that room, Paloma finally spoke differently. What did she confess, and what did it feel like hearing her say it out loud?
Paloma sat up in a private room with a small bandage on her forehead. She looked shocked I came. She said therapy forced her to face how messed up she'd been, how she used male attention to avoid old trauma. She admitted it wasn't an excuse for what she did to me and my relationships. Then she said she'd been jealous of me for years. I had stability, a career, people who liked me. She said she felt like she had nothing but her looks and a terror of becoming invisible. So she tried to prove she was better by taking the one thing she could steal, my partners. I expected vindication to feel good. Instead, I felt exhausted, like my anger had been holding its breath for too long.
And you didn't hand her forgiveness. What did you say? And what did Mira reveal in the hallway about that police report?
I told Paloma I didn't forgive her. I said I didn't know if I ever would, but I appreciated her admitting what she'd done. Then I drew the line. Don't contact me. Don't contact Ronan. Leave us alone. In the hallway, I ran into Mira. I asked why Paloma changed so suddenly. Mira told me the missing piece. That morning, Paloma had made an appointment to file a report against Ronan. The police contacted her therapist, and the therapist convinced her it was a terrible idea, that it could ruin Paloma's life and Ronan's. I felt dizzy. She was really going to do it. Mira said yes, but she didn't. I walked out shaking, realizing how close we'd come to a lie becoming a permanent stain.
When you told Ronan it was over, he asked you something huge. How did that moment happen, and what did you choose?
I left the hospital and called Ronan. I told him Paloma backed down, that the report wasn't happening. He went quiet, then said, "Good, because I have something to ask you." He asked me to move in with him. I laughed at the timing, but he stayed serious. He said he'd spent 7 years alone in a cell and didn't want to waste time now that he had something real. He said he loved me and wanted to build a life with me. I said yes. In March, I moved in. We found a small apartment near his work, nothing fancy but ours. We adopted a shelter dog named Rocket. I kept contact with Mira and Kier and let everyone else wait on the other side of my boundary.
Months later, your mom invited you back. What did you say, and what hit you when Paloma's handwritten letter arrived?
In June, Elowen called and asked if I was coming to the 4th of July barbecue. I said no. She cried and said I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family was already torn. I was just done pretending. Then a physical letter arrived from Paloma. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. It was long and raw. Paloma wrote about being sexually abused when she was 12 by a family friend, and nobody believed her. She wrote about learning her looks were the only currency people valued, how her body became the only way she felt seen. She wrote about years of therapy, medication, and shame. Reading it, I felt anger and grief collide. It didn't erase what she did to me, but it explained the engine behind it.
What else did Paloma write, especially about you, and how did Ronan help you hold that letter without letting it rewrite your pain?
Paloma wrote that watching me build a stable life while she fell apart made her feel worthless. She admitted she believed stealing my happiness would fix her emptiness. She included a printed photo from years ago. Her smiling beside Silas Endicott, one of the boyfriends she'd taken. On the back she wrote, "I am sorry I made you feel invisible. The truth is, I was the one who felt invisible." I showed Ronan the letter. He read it slowly, then asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know. Ronan told me I didn't owe her anything. Not forgiveness, not access, nothing. He said people can change. He did, but most don't do the work. Whether Paloma changed wasn't my job to manage. That gave me permission to breathe.
So, what did you actually write back? And when Mira later called about Paloma's engagement, what did that do to you?
I wrote Paloma a short letter back. I I said I'd read hers. I was sorry for what she'd been through, but I still needed distance. Maybe one day we could have some kind of relationship, but not now, not yet. Paloma replied that she understood. It didn't heal anything, but it shifted the tone from war to boundaries. Time passed, and my nervous system finally learned what calm felt like. Then Mira called with news that startled me. Paloma was engaged to a woman named Fallon Whitmore, someone she met at her therapy group. They'd been together a year. Mira said Paloma seemed calmer, happier, more genuine. Paloma wanted to invite me to the wedding, but she was too nervous to ask directly. Um, I stared at the wall and felt the story move again.
That night, when you told Ronan about the wedding, what did he say and what happened when you finally called Paloma yourself?
I told Ronan, expecting suspicion that would harden me into no. Instead, he was steady. He said it was up to me, and he'd support whatever I decided. I asked if he'd come with me if I chose to go. He smiled and said he wouldn't miss it. The next day, I called Paloma. My hand shook, then steadied when she answered softly, without her old brightness. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about Fallon, about therapy, about learning to be someone who doesn't need to win to feel real. I told her about my life with Ronan and Rocket. It was strange talking to her like a normal person instead of an enemy. By the end, I felt raw, like I'd opened a door I'd spent years nailing shut.
During that call, when Paloma finally asked you to come, what did you say and what did you feel about facing everyone again?
Paloma asked if I'd come to the wedding. She said she'd understand if I said no, but it would mean a lot if I was there. I surprised myself and said yes. The wedding is in 2 months. I told Ronan I didn't know how I'd feel walking back into that family room with everyone watching. I didn't know if Paloma's change was deep or just a better mask. But I noticed something new. I wasn't spiraling or rehearsing humiliation. Ronan said, "Life after prison teaches you to take things one day at a time. People are messy, complicated, sometimes awful, sometimes surprising." He said I didn't have to decide my whole future in one night. That helped. I could show up, witness, and leave. I could choose myself without a fight.
You keep saying he chose you. How did Ronan talk about second chances and what did that do to the way you saw yourself?
Ronan talks about second chances like they're real. He said he never expected to get out and be loved despite his past. I told him he surprised me too. He was the first person who chose me over Paloma, who saw through her games and didn't call me jealous for naming them. That choice rewired something in me. It didn't erase the past, but it loosened its grip. Some nights we sit on our couch with Rocket curled between us and argue about whether we should get a cat. Ronan says yes because a dog needs balance. I say we already have enough responsibility. I laugh because normal used to feel impossible. Now it feels sacred. Even when wedding anxiety tightens my chest, I know Paloma can't steal this life.
As the wedding gets closer, what still triggers you? And how do you keep attending from turning into reopening the whole wound?
My body remembers. A family group text tightens my shoulders. A holiday photo drops my stomach. Memory doesn't disappear just because I chose better. But this time, I'm not alone inside it. Ronan isn't a shield. He's proof the old story isn't the only story. I'm not going back to beg for acceptance. I'm not planning confrontations. I've accepted my family may never understand why I needed distance, and they may always call boundaries rebellion. Understanding is optional. Respect is not. Going to the wedding doesn't mean reopening my life. It means witnessing a moment, then returning to my own home. I'll stay close to Mira and Kier and keep the rest at a safe distance. The most powerful closure isn't a dramatic scene. It's leaving without bleeding.
Before we wrap, where are you sitting in life right now? And what do you tell yourself when the future still feels uncertain?
Ronan and I are on our couch with Rocket curled between us, debating pets like it's the biggest problem we have. I don't know what will happen at that wedding. I don't know if Paloma and I will ever be close again. But for the first time, I'm not terrified of the answer. I have Ronan, our small apartment, and a quiet life that feels earned. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Paloma. "Thank you for saying yes to the wedding. It means everything." I text back, "See you there." And then I put my phone down, breathing easy. Ellen. Maura, Thank you for trusting me and all of us with something this personal. I know stories like yours don't end with a neat ribbon. They end with choices, boundaries, and the courage to keep showing up for your own life.
Maura, thank you for trusting me and all of us with something this personal. I know stories like yours don't end with a neat ribbon. They end with choices, boundaries, and the courage to keep showing up for your own life. And to everyone watching, if this hit close to home, you're not alone. Please like this video, leave a comment, even just one sentence, because it helps other people find these stories. Subscribe to Broken Relationship Tales for more real, raw relationship experiences and share this episode with someone who needs it. Your support keeps the channel alive and it keeps these voices heard.